Afternoon. Just arrived home from work and this is waiting for me in the mailbox. So last Thursday, I think it was Thursday night, someone posted on one of those local Facebook CD trading groups that I'm a member of. Someone posted up about 10 or 15 albums. They were mostly metal or metal adjacent. And there was a few there that I'd like to look of, but I got these two. These were $5 each. $5 New Zealand, which is about, I've said before, two to three US dollars. And I also paid $6 postage. It was couriered, because I can see there's a courier company, Fastway. I'm covering up my address, obviously, because I have a phobia about doxing myself. Not that anyone's going to really care. Okay, here you can see Tool Lateralus, which I own currently just do I have? Anyway, I've owned it in the past, but I don't think I've ever owned a complete disc plus case artwork version. This looks to be in okay-ish condition, but not. The CD's fine. There's a few little scratches on it, but nothing major. This is a bit. So this is. I've never actually seen this one. I've seen it. There's a number of different artworks for Lateralus. All their albums have got various artworks, don't they? Different kind of editions. Like there's the hologram ones of Anima, and then the regular ones. That's that Alex Gray artwork. Alex Gray is a American kind of, I don't know how you would class him. He's an artist, but he kind of does that style of, I guess, elements of Eastern mysticism and spirituality and so on, and you know. So Tool, I like Tool. I wouldn't say I love Tool, but I've been a fan of theirs since they first, well, not since they first, but since Undertow, because I remember I had a compilation in 1993 that had Sober on it, and I thought they, even then at that time when I would have been a pretty young kid, I thought they sounded very different. You know, Maynard's, obviously his voice kind of stood out at that time. And I always thought they were interesting. I wouldn't say I went for all their stuff. There was a period there, I think it was about the time when Anima came out, around 96, where it seemed like everyone was obsessed with Tool around my age group. And it took me a bit longer to get into them. But I did. I like Anima, and I like Lateralus, and I like 10,000 Days. Their most recent album, I can't remember what it was called now, Fair Inoculum, I feel was a bit, just sounded like 10,000 Days and Lateralus rehashed, like especially 10,000 Days rehashed. But I really haven't given it much of a listen beyond when it first came out. I listened through to it about 3 or 4 times. Maybe I need to go back to it. But I saw them live in Tokyo in 2007 on the 10,000 Days tour. I thought they put a pretty good live show. I went through a period where I really loved Danny Carey's drumming. Not that I'm a drummer, but I mean, it would have been about 2000. It was probably when this came out, around 2001, where I just, I was like obsessed with it for like 6 months. And then again, in about 2005, I became obsessed with the Anima. I kind of have these obsessive periods of albums where I'll just listen to nothing but that for a while, and then kind of not, and then come back to it every now and then. But anyway, the other one, now this looks like it's in pretty shite condition, if I'm being honest, and I'm talking about just the case. Metallica Load from 1996. Like, God, you could have at least bloody cleaned that up, mate. $5. You'd think you'd give it at least a kind of a wipe off with a cloth. Hang on a second. This looks like it's been used as a coaster for coffee or something. Look, was that really necessary for me to have to do that? If you're selling something, most of the things you get when you buy these, when you buy secondhand, I find most sellers really go out of their way to give you like a clean, fresh jewel case that hasn't got any cracks on it and has been, cleaned and wiped. I'm always actually quite impressed by the condition of stuff I get. This guy here, what I would guess, maybe I'm making excuses for him. He got these in a bulk load and is just kind of off selling them and hasn't even really even looked at them. But still, if you package them up, you surely would have seen them. So the CD itself. Yeah, it's okay. It's a few little dots of bits and pieces there, but that's all right. So yeah, Metallica Load from 1996. This had a big place in my teenage years because when this came out, I was about 15, 14, 15. And, it'd been 5 years since the Black Album came out. Black Album came out when I was, kind of before my teenage years. But I do have a memory of Enter Sandman, seeing the video for that on TV and being kind of scared by it, but also thinking it was a cool song. But then kind of as I got to about 12, 13, then I kind of started really liking rock music and first getting into metal. And so by the time it came to 1996, I was I'd listened to all of Metallica's albums, and I was like, everyone was like in high anticipation of hearing what they were going to do next after the Black Album, one of the biggest albums ever written and released in history. And so leading up to this, you saw pictures coming out. They had all cut their hair. And I think the first single released was Until It Sleeps, which even to this day, I don't like that song. And so there was a bit of like, huh? What's going on? Because, for the die-hard Metallica metal fans, they'd already... The Black Album, it was already a step too far for some of them. And so by the time when we got to this one, a lot of people were just outraged or disappointed or whatever you want to say. I wasn't that invested in it, as in like I wasn't really a metal kid. I was more of a grunge, alternative rock as my formative music. And so I wasn't really like, they got their hair. I didn't really give a shit about that. But I got to say, I kind of liked it when it first came out. I didn't like Until It Sleep, like I said, and I still don't like that song. But I probably owned this album. I have owned every Metallica album up to Saint Anger. I don't think I have never owned... I do have Death and Magnetic, but I don't have Hardwired, or the most recent was Lux Eterna. Is it Lux Eterna? No, 72 Seasons. But from Kill 'Em All through to Death Magnetic, I have owned every Metallica album either on CD or cassette at least once, many times 2 or 3. I'd say I probably own the Black Album 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 times. I own one of the first ever tapes I owned was a cassette copy of the Black Album. I've owned this. This is probably my 3rd copy. I mean, the first time I bought this, I bought it secondhand off my friend at high school because he wanted to get rid of it, and he kind of offloaded it to me for like $2 or something stupid like that, which back then was, for a CD, $2 was an absolute bargain. But yeah, there was kind of like some like there was a period there it was uncool to have this CD, like say like 6 months after it was released. That sucks. It's not even metal. What did they call Bluesica? There was like people changed the name Bluesalica. to say that they were no longer metal, they were just doing like blues rock. But I like, what do I like? I like Ate My Bitch. I like King Nothing. I've come to really like Hero of the Day. At the time, I didn't like that. And I thought it was quite overplayed on music TV back in the 90s, late 90s. But especially in the last 3 years, I've listened to that song a lot and listened to the lyrics. And I actually really, really like that song now. Love Bleeding Me. That's a great song. Like Poor Twisted Me. Mama Said. I reckon that's a great song. Outlaw Torn. Thorn Within. Actually, that's the one that the Jason Newsted one, I think, isn't it? But anyway, there's the new era Metallica logo that they used for a period. They don't use that anymore though. Where they're kind of putting the M's together to form like a shuriken type thing. But yeah, I'm gradually rebuying any Metallica album when I come across it. So I've got this now. I've got Saint Anger. I've got Death Magnetic, Black Album, Ride the Lightning, and do I have? No, I'm trying to think of something else I have, but I don't have. The other kind of thing that people talk about is the artwork to this, or the photos. So this was done by Anton, I think it's Corbin is the pronunciation, Anton Corbin. Where's his name in here? Who is a noted, famous photographer. Oh, there it is, Anton Corbin. I think he's Dutch. He'd done photography with lots of bands. I think he did back with when Joy Division was still together. He did photography with them. We maybe made a movie with them, like a film, but not necessarily something you associate with Metallica. But so he did these kind of like stylized, some of these black and white, and some of them were wearing makeup, especially Lars and Kirk. And in retrospect, they've talked, especially James has talked a lot about this era and how he kind of just went along with it because he felt, I don't know, he felt he needed to, or Lars especially had this kind of vision for what he wanted their next move in their career to be. And some people were kind of talking to them, they wanted to be U2. And James didn't necessarily want to go in that direction. And I'm not saying musically, but I'd say more image-wise. But he did, because that's part of being in a band, is giving in and accepting other points of view. And obviously these guys are sometimes noted for not doing that, or clashing a lot. He's still got a bit of a mullet there, doesn't he? He kind of went through stages, James, where when Black Album first came out, he still had kind of the full long hair. Then he kind of went through, I think during the tour for that, because they toured that album for like 2 or 3 years constantly, he shaved the sides of his head and he had kind of a real mullet going on, short on top and like long all down the back. And you can see he's still got remnants of that there. And then by the time Load came out, he had gone, as some people call it, full GQ. Like there, And so I think in retrospect, people have come more to appreciate Load and Reload. I think Load's a better album than Reload. I think Reload's got more filler on it. But because of what came after, especially directly after with Saint Anger, which is even 20 years after, I just think that is just a fucking rotten album. That it's just boring. And that's the overarching theme I can think of for Saint Anger is boring. But even with maybe the other stuff that came after that, people go back, well, actually Load wasn't so bad. It had songs, you do hear people kind of come back and say that kind of thing more nowadays with some kind of hindsight. I'm always going to love Metallica. Kind of Metallica, one of the default bands that I say, if someone says, who's your favorite artist? Sometimes I go through like Soundgarden, Nirvana. I've had times where I'd say Opeth, maybe in the 2000s, Pink Floyd, and sometimes I'd say Metallica would be sometimes the band that kind of first comes to my mind when someone asks what's your favorite band. So they are kind of those first four albums. I know everyone says that. It's kind of like the cliche thing to sing the first four, but they are, especially for me, Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. Those two in particular are just perfect. I talked before about some other albums I consider perfect. Well, I consider those two albums to be perfect. Obviously, Kill 'Em All, sometimes I think is you can hear it's a kind of a first album, and there's some things I think that sound a little bit cheesy, but it's still a great, great album. Justice, to the other end, like a great, great album, but sometimes things are a little bit overblown production-wise. It has its kind of hits and misses. Black Album, I love the Black Album. Maybe a few songs of filler in there, but overall it's a great, great album. Load and Reload, I think, are definitely a step down from the previous, because everything's going to be a step down from those albums. You can't keep that up forever. But it's still pretty damn good albums. Saint Anger, sack of shit. Death Magnetic, when it first came out, I was like, oh, this is great. But then I think the more I listened to it, the more I kind of thought some of those songs are way too long. They would have done with kind of chopping some of them in half. And then there's also the production of that, which is, what do they call it, brick wall, where you get a fucking headache if you listen to it on the headphones, because it's just everything is, the EQ is at maximum the whole way through. There's a few albums like that. The Queensryche album that first came out after Jeff Tate left, the self-titled one, that's like that, where I didn't even know what was wrong with it when I first heard it. I heard it and I liked it, but it was like, it gave me a headache. It made me feel like I can't listen to this, even though I like the music. It's because the production is just, everything is pushed to the max. Hardwired, it's got some good songs, but again, some filler. 72 Seasons, I think I've only listened through to that album once. And it's certainly not a bad album, but I really haven't listened to it enough to kind of give a decent appraisal. So anyway, I've seen Metallica live 3 times in my life. Hopefully they'll tour down here for 72 Seasons, but yeah. I've noticed that more and more when bands are coming here, and bands of that size, like Foo Fighters are coming early next year, and tickets are like $200, $300, which is just crazy. I assume Metallica would be a similar price if they came here. Makes it hard to justify. Anyway, 2 second-hand albums, $5 each. After cleaning that up, that actually looks fine. If that guy had cleaned it up, I wouldn't have had such a bad initial reaction to it. And Metallica and Tool, Lateralus and Load. Oh, they both start with L, don't they? Yeah. Always nice to get things in the post. And like I said, I'm kind of nowadays kind of tending more and more towards this kind of purchasing as opposed to the shops. I actually made a video the week before last going around some shops. I wanted to actually show me visiting the shops and showing the kind of stock they have. But basically it was beyond my technical capabilities. I had all these bits chopped up of things, but a few things I just couldn't figure out, and also then I didn't have the room on my phone, and anyway, maybe I'll try to do that again sometime, just to kind of give an idea of what you find in the shops nowadays and how more and more it's hard to find anything decent in those secondhand shops. And so that's why I'm kind of tending more towards buying more curated stuff online, even though it's a little bit more expensive, $5 as opposed to $1. It's worth it, I think. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.